Topping today's news, the country suffers its third homicide for the new year while the man responsible for the first two murders appears in court today. The government intervenes after a Grand Bahama company was set to lay off workers, a new school public bus system set to be launched, and a private airplane crashed shortly after takeoff on Exuma. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jcn Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Tragedy striking the Montel Heights community for the second time for 2023. 3 homicides in the first 6 days of the year after a 34-year-old male resident of the area was gunned down at a local bar around 2:30 this morning. This latest homicide follows a double homicide at a residence on Mantall Street, Montel Heights, on January 2nd. Police Press Liaison Officer Chief Superintendent Chrisling Skippings reporting that the victim was at the bar on the corner of Washington Street and Robinson Road when he was approached by an unknown male who wore dark clothing and a ski mask. The gunman shot the 34-year-old multiple times about the body before fleeing the scene on foot into the Montel Heights area. Emergency medical service personnel attended the scene and confirmed no vital signs of life. Police are actively investigating and appealing to members of the public who may have any information regarding this incident to contact the police. 28-year-old Sherwin Munnings appeared before Magistrate Kara Turnquest, where he was brought up on charges for the double killing of Kevin Andrews and Laranique Roll. The particulars are that during the early morning hours on Monday, January 2nd, both Andrews and Roll were asleep in a home on Mantall Street when the accused, Munnings, reportedly entered the home and shot the victims multiple times about the body. Due to the nature of his charges, Munnings was not required to enter a plea and was remanded to the Bahamas Department of Corrections until he returns to court on March 14th at 10 a.m. for a service of a voluntary bill of indictment. Meanwhile, also today, shortly after noon, police were called to the scene of a shooting in Nassau Village, the community there. The male victim was taken to the Princess Margaret Hospital via emergency medical services, and his condition at present is unknown, but officials unofficially reports say that the victim was in serious condition when taken from the scene. The Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority, or AAIA, is investigating a plane crash on Exuma. AAIA officials say that it was notified of the incident this morning involving a Piper PA-23 aircraft with 2 people on board, which crashed shortly after takeoff from the Exuma International Airport. Preliminary reports are that both individuals were able to exit the aircraft as Airport Authority rescue personnel responded to the crash site. The AAIA has begun a thorough investigation into this matter. At the time of this report, it was unclear whether there were any serious injuries to the passengers. The Freeport Container Port, FCP, has reversed a decision to lay off 20 employees following the intervention by the government, specifically Prime Minister Philip Davis. Public Services Minister Fred Mitchell, who is also the Progressive Liberal Party chairman, telling reporters that on Wednesday, January 4th, the government was advised via a letter from the Freeport Container Port executives dated December 28, 2022, that effective December 31st, 2022, it would be laying off 20 of its employees. A statement by Minister for Grand Bahama, Ginger Moxey, revealed the government's disappointment in the intent of the company to lay off workers, considering the fact that Grand Bahamians are still recovering from the devastation brought on by Hurricane Dorian in 2019.
This city just seemed to be catching a break and on an upward trajectory. And for these developments to happen just seems unfortunate is the way to state it, in a kind of understatement there, but shocking to me. The fact is that this community needs to grow and develop, and it needs all of its commercial entities, all entities, private and public, to pull together for the success of an upward movement of this community.
Minister Mitchell says government officials, including himself, Minister Moxey, Labor Minister Keith Bell, and Prime Minister Davis discussed the matter in a phone call Thursday morning. One question in the matter, according to Minister Mitchell, is whether the Freeport Container Port followed the law in its decision. He says the company made the decision to terminate 20 employees due to a fall in business by some 30% in recent months. Minister Mitchell says there should have been no reason for the layoffs based on previous revenue from the ports.
There does not seem to be any reason for this, particularly since during the pandemic, shipping companies made a fortune, and you cannot tell me that because you have some reverses in recent times, that makes up for all of the profits that were made during the time of this pandemic. It just comes off as unconscionable and certainly contrary to all the best efforts that everyone is seeking to make to try and have this community succeed. So that I wanted to make that point myself on behalf of the party, and to say to all of our supporters that we're doing our best to try and see what we can do to deal with this situation.
Now, there have been many complaints from Bahamians about their treatment as employees of companies. Minister Mitchell labels this as a serial problem and asserts that most of the time the complaints come from employees of foreign-owned companies.
Investment is good. People make generous profits in this country, but they seem to dislike Bahamians. Can't figure out why that is. So what has happened, we understand, is that the number of work permits has actually increased, not decreased, since they had Bahamian management running the company. So we have to find out why that is. And what you don't want to do, of course, is to be xenophobic, because there may be reasons why you have to bring in expatriate labor. But expatriate labor should be should match the benefits which are obtained to Bahamians, not at the expense of Bahamians. And that's the situation which all of us will be looking at going forward. But yeah, there have been many complaints which have come to us about the management of the company.
He says that the country cannot afford for the city of Freeport to fail, and anything that may cause Freeport to not succeed must be dealt with quickly. And finally, in this segment, the Free National Movement weighing in on matters on Grand Bahama as negotiations for the new Grand Bahama International Airport continue, with Deputy Prime Minister Chester Cooper saying that the groundbreaking of the brand new airport is set to happen in the first quarter of this year, with completion set for 2025. Opposition leader Michael Pintard says that projected timeline from the Deputy Prime Minister is not possible.
He have not been able to take sight of whether or not the group had any money, any of the groups that was on the short list, whether they had the required resources. He has not seen any blueprint to look at the total scope of works to know, even in a phased process, when the property would be completed. And to the best of our knowledge, they hadn't completed the acquisition of the additional or the primary site on which the airport would be built, because there have been multiple discussions about whether the exact site would be used, with the airport being extended on stilts, or the bottom being open for water in the event that there's a future flooding to run at the lower level. But it is our understanding that the property transactions have not been complete.
Mr. Pintard says the opposition cautioned the Davis administration on their experiences with businesses on Grand Bahama prior to them leaving office, which came to a standstill during the height of the pandemic. Those partners mentioned were inclusive of both the airport and the sale of the Grand Lucayan Hotel. He says the opposition wishes to assist where they can. However, they have found some decisions made by the Davis administration worrisome.
We heard that the government now has a company that it believes it will be able to announce shortly. Well, we're confident that that's not a result of their appointment of that board. Obviously, that board would not have had sufficient time to review, to do the due diligence on the company. So we suspect that this is one of the groups, if in fact they are being truthful, that this is one of the groups that was on the list while we were still in government. We've said previously that we also had a concern that the government allocated a contract for the renovation of the domestic terminal, the old domestic terminal, with very little to no regard for contractors in Grand Bahama. We thought it was a slap in the face that when opportunities have finally become available for work on the island, that all of these outstanding companies have not been given due consideration.
Mr. Pintard states that though the FNM is pulling for the government's revamp of Grand Bahama and rallying behind the completion of the airport, they are very aware of the negative impact of loose talk they say the Davis administration has demonstrated thus far. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.